Welcome to Believing the Real, a series of talks on the theology of the real. Welcome to chapter 13 of Theology of the Real. This time we will discuss money, the rise of money as an interhuman endeavor or enterprise, money as a subversive element in all traditions and cultures, and in fact, money as a network uniting all of humanity. Because ultimately we will find and show how money is in fact embodied trust. Hello, welcome to another episode of Believing the Real. This is episode 12 in the series, and today we will start speaking about money. But first, let's recap. We investigated the way in which human beings perceive the real through various manifestations of the ideal, i.e. various theories, conjectures, dogmas, doctrines, whatever that we have about reality. But we have seen that this is mediated actually through the visions of others. And if we were to reformulate where we were the last time, then we reached a conclusion that trust is the mediator of everything. We trust in other human beings. And because of fayoti, which is, these are neologisms that I've prepared for you, but fayoti means the fundamental ignorance of the individual, because we really cannot know anything about reality except as it is mediated through our trust in others. We rely on OGSEC. Only a group sharing experience can know, because as we saw with the image of the elephant, only when many blind men get a better resolution of the elephant, then we can really have a better picture of the real, which is always based on the ideas of others. And in fact, we can therefore be said to be living within the realm of a TISWOORIOM. That's the most Jabberwock flavored neologism here. So this TISWOORIOM, what it means is the inter-subjective world of others represented in our minds. In fact, this is our interface with reality. Through what we have learned from others, through language, through our interface with this representation of the intersubjective world that we live in, that is our way of creating dialogue, of interacting with the real. So we saw how science contributed to this TISWOORIOM by establishing disciplines, concentrated groups of people whose intersubjectivity specializes in various aspects of reality. And we had this idea of the elephant as being a representation of the real that is always beyond us because of fayoti, because this is systemic ignorance of the individual. So everything is mediated through our trust in the representations of reality provided by others, by other individuals, by other specialists, and so on. We saw this, how this operates in science, but one of the greatest manifestations of this TISWOORIOM is in fact money, the much maligned concept. It's not a substance, it's not a material, although people equate money with materiality, but actually we will see soon that money is very spiritual, and money is based on trust, and it is the utmost and the most concrete manifestation of the TISWOORIOM, in fact. So I've prepared a few quotations for you, and we will go through them, and then we will start to analyze this concept of what money is and how it is in fact embodied trust. It is in fact an embodiment of the TISWOORIOM an embodiment of inter-subjectivity that in fact at present crosses all civilizations in much the same way as we saw that academic pursuits have become something that crosses all cultures and does not depend on gender, race, religion, nationality, etc., but transcends beyond it to provide a truth that is acceptable to all human beings, regardless of who they are and what their fundamental essentialist connections are, their affiliations are, their native affiliations are. The same can be said for money, but in a very complex and interesting fashion, because money arises and is used across civilizations in various denominations and forms, and always is everywhere an embodiment of trust. Okay, so the first element when speaking about money, before we speak about the way that money is actually embodied trust, it's interesting to note that by embodying trust that transcends each parochial society, each native society, it actually undermines everything that is traditional. And for this, I brought here a quotation from Karl Marx from the Communist Manifesto in his rage against the bourgeoisie, the class who value money, and in fact, it's the rise of capitalism, and he rails against it. So this is interesting to see how he described this. So he wrote, whenever it has got the upper hand, i.e. a market economy, a free trade, etc., what he calls the bourgeoisie, it has put an end to all feudal, patriarchal, idyllic relations. All those relationships that we saw that are pre-wired into us are undermined by money. All those relationships of loyalty, of authority, of subjugation, of acceptance on trust are undermined by our trust in money, and we will see how much we trust money. But in any case, just from the external point of view of Marx, he says that money undermines everything. It has pitilessly torn asunder the motley feudal ties that bound man to his natural superiors, and has left remaining no other nexus between man and man than naked self-interest, callous cash payment. It has drowned the most heavenly ecstasies of religious fervor, of chivalrous enthusiasm, of Philistine sentimentalism in the icy water of egotistical calculation. That Marx, he really is something, huh? Amazing, potent stuff. It has resolved personal worth into exchange value, and in place of the numberless indefeasible chartered freedoms, has set up that single unconscionable freedom, free trade. So we see that Marx, the great enemy of capitalism, as it were, and we will talk about Marx again in future talks and see how he missed the point in many ways by, again, creating an essentialist view, in petrifying everything about the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie are to blame, as if not everyone is woven in this fabric of money. And the question is how money became so strong, so potent as to undermine everything. And it does undermine everything. Money is part of the ascent of modernity, and we shall see the way that money has become increasingly disembodied and increasingly detached from any commodity, and in fact truly embodies trust. And it's important to see that it is part of our era, this late modernity, that structurally money is very much akin to science, in that it cuts across all these wonderful traditional things that Marx pointed out. Because regardless of religion, gender, nationality, faith, race, whatever, everyone has a share in the market. Everyone is involved in the market. And the inequalities of the market of money are inequalities involving various layers of trust and the ability to access money. And we shall see many aspects of this, focusing on the way that money embodies trust in a way that cuts across all these natural ties. So having thus portrayed money as actually one of the main catalysts, one of the main enzymes, as it were, catalyzing our present era, let's now start looking at it at its location within human society, its history, its rise, and its current position. There's a lot to say about it, and let's start our journey now. Okay, we'll start off with this very interesting book, very dramatically written book, The History of Money by Jack Weatherford, from which we will start by reading a few excerpts that I've marked out for you. And this will set us off in our pursuit of this global network of trust embodied in the concept of money. But before we get to that, let's have a look at some of the some quotations here. First, just as a kind of humorous quotation, and I think this is really relevant to what we're doing here. He quotes Voltaire here. He writes, "I'd like to acknowledge special inspiration during the writing of this book from Voltaire's comment that it is easier to write on money than to obtain it, and those who gain it just much as at those who only know how to write about it." So, okay, that's a really nice anecdote. And now let's get to the first ideas that we're going to quote from Weatherford. He is comparing now, he is going to talk about a woman in Africa selling local produce and persons in other places in the world and how money interconnects them. And he does it in a very graphic and pleasant way, so I'm going to read a bit from his text to you. I'm starting from page 3. The woman who had balanced the milk and eggs on her head takes a load to the dairy area, where she displays the eggs in a small gourd next to the larger bowl of milk. Once she has sold her goods to townspeople or traveling wholesalers, the village woman might buy a plastic pail, some tobacco, a block of salt, a few cups of sugar, or some other luxury goods to take home with her. The food, however, is for the townspeople to buy, not her. The few overripe bananas from the coast, the dry dates brought in from an oasis in the Sahara, and the expensive oranges from the coastal farms cost more than the whole load of vegetables or milk that she was able to bring to the market. So we see an image of a very poor woman who is selling self-produce. However, despite their illiteracy and complete lack of formal education, most of the women in the marketplace at Bandiagara can negotiate, buy, and sell with great facility. They barter produce for produce, will accept payment in coins and paper money, often in several different currencies, and can make change. Even though they cannot read the words on the money, they recognize the value of different bills, primarily by their color, shape, size, and the images on them. Okay, moving on to page 4. The milk sellers' primary competitors, now is really going into the main thesis here. Primary competitors in Bandiagara, which is a remote place in Africa, are not other women like here in the neighborhood. They are the dairy farmers of Wisconsin, New Zealand, and the Netherlands. The imported milk is condensed, canned, and distributed free in the poor countries of Africa. Although clearly marked not for sale in English, it persistently shows up for sale in the stall immediately next to the young mother from Kanikombole. So he's a bit, he's elbowing some of the charity works of the more affluent states in the world that they cannot really reach their addressees. That is the main problem with charity, that certain mafia elements or other commercial elements take hold of this charity, and it never reaches its true addressees, as it were, and even creates competition. But in any case, let's take this at face value. The important thing is that he points to a network, that she's not alone in bringing the milk. She has competition, and that competition arises from places far beyond the local. As Weatherford, what's the name of this? As Weatherford writes here, the amount of canned milk for sale depends in part on economic conditions in North America, Europe, and the South Pacific. It depends how much milk Nestle, Hershey, or Kraft buy for their annual production, and the fluctuating value of the American dollar, the Dutch guilder, and the New Zealand dollar relative to the French franc, to which the West African franc of Mali is tied. It depends on how hot the summer is and how much ice cream people eat. It depends on the world's annual yield of soybeans, one of the major competitors of milk products. The amount of canned milk for sale in Bandiara in any given month also depends on the dairy subsidies and the foreign aid appropriations made by the US Congress in Washington, D.C., the food policies of the United Nations, High Commissioner for Refugees in Geneva, and the European Common Market headquartered in Brussels, and the mercurial aid programs of religious and other private charitable organizations around the world. So in fact, he's describing here the competition, and already, even though he hasn't spoken of money yet, already shows us that this woman is not an island unto herself, but is part of a global market in which many factors operate. Let's move on a bit to page 6. So he's now comparing this young mother to a trader in New York. And he's saying the young mother in the marketplace in Mali and the young stock trader in New York do not live in the same country or even the same continent. They will probably never meet or even know of each other's existence. He is an Irish Catholic living in one of the most technologically advanced, affluent, and crowded cities in the world. She belongs to the animistic Dogon tribe and lives in a small village without running water or electricity. He uses the most advanced communication technology in the world, while she can neither read nor write and must bargain with hand signals. And yet they are united in one network, in a single grid of interlocking institutions that spans the globe, connecting the stock markets of Hong Kong, San Francisco, and New York to Amsterdam, London, and Lima, as well as all the small towns, villages, and farms scattered around the globe. The same market connects every country, every language, and every religion and ethnic group. Many independent markets once operated throughout the world. Some sold milk and beans, others sold stocks and bonds. Some sold insurance and agricultural futures, others sold mortgages or cars. Today, electronic communications efficiently connect all these markets into a single international market, uniting all parts of the globe and, just as importantly, all parts of the market. They are united by one thing: money. No matter whether they call their money dollars, rubles, yen, marks, francs, pounds, pesos, bahts, ringgits, kroners, kwanzas, levs, escudos, liras, bipilvels, reals, drachmas, shekels, yuans, quetzals, pangas, ngultrums. Wow, is this going to end? Uguyas, rupees, shillings, or Afghanis. Is that all? He ended the list already? They all operate in essentially the same way as smaller parts of an international monetary system that reaches every farm, island, and village on the globe. No matter where and no matter what the local currency, the modern system permits the easy and quick flow of money from one market to another. So, okay, I'm not sure how the connection is from this woman selling in the market and contending with the produce sent by charity organizations. I think he's undermining his own claims here, his own argument here, because the charity thing is like an extra market thing. It's like these people, instead of buying and selling, they push things into the market that are supposed to be free. But again, they also are ultimately embedded or absorbed into the market, and they become part of the produce that is competing with the local produce, and of course mediated by money. What will other people buy? The canned goods from New Zealand or the local produce there in Mali? And of course, these competing products can compete in people's minds according to their desires. Do you want fresh goat milk, or do you want condensed sweet milk from New Zealand? It doesn't really matter that the point of entry into the market was a charity organization, because ultimately there is a price there and they are competing on that price. So in fact, the important thing is here is the money. And there is a money system everywhere, and that unites everything. All people everywhere are united in one huge money system that, as we saw at the beginning of our talk, is in fact undermining traditions, because what really happens here is that it all boils down to, do you have the money for the product? Can you be a player in the market or not? And this really doesn't matter. And this is the point here, if you're using all this list of currencies that he brought here, francs, pounds, etc., or you are working in a remote market like the one described in Mali here, or in a huge market like New York, for example. You are still interconnected through money, and that money is, as we will show further on, embodied trust. But first, let's take another look and look at it from the other side, from the side, or not of the seller here presented, the seller competing with others, but of a buyer. So what is the place of money within the TISWOORIOM, the inter-subjective world of other represented in our minds? Obviously, money is like language, something that we all use without much thought about it, but its very value originates in the minds of others. It is because people agree about the value of money that it is money. The very trust embedded in money is what makes it money, as it were. It's because other people value these symbols, this coinage, today these symbols on a screen, or even the fact that numbers are transmitted from one electronic means to another, because this is valued in the intersubjective world of others, they becomes money. But it is so embodied, so real, that in fact people can starve if they don't have this symbolic thing, this product of the mind. And everything, the entire world, is indeed interconnected. If we take the other side, say we go into supermarket, a local supermarket, wherever you are, and you buy a can of tuna. Now, that can of tuna that you paid for, I don't know, in whatever currency you work, in whatever, whether cash or by credit card or coupons or whatever, in whatever way you paid for that can, that the money that goes into the system now through the payment that you made will eventually percolate to the producers of that product. But what goes into that product? What goes into even a single product that reaches the end consumer? So if we take this can of tuna, okay, so first let's go back. Let's just sort of go back and start to kind of unravel the making of this tuna can. So first, you bought it at a store, right? A supermarket, let's say. So this store involves many people, and these people who set up the store, maybe the company that runs the supermarket chains, they have investors, they're an incorporated company limited, and they bought this building. There's a person who operates who built the building, the contractor, maybe a contracting company. There were a lot of officials involved in the regulation and zoning, giving this supermarket the license to open and operate. And then ultimately, when it's set up, there are a lot of people involved in setting up the shelves, setting up everything involved in the physical infrastructure of this shop. Of course, we have to employ all these people who are going to sell it. If it's a big supermarket, then probably cashiers, people who take stock, people who populate the shelves, managers of various levels, and so on. And that's just before we even take this off the shelf. It's just the vehicle that brings this to us, makes it available to us as we walk into the supermarket, or even if we buy online from that supermarket. Then other people will run around between the shelves and get our package ready, and someone will deliver it to our door. Great way to shop. But in any case, the physical infrastructure is there to support this vending of the tuna can. The tuna can is brought to you on this platter. You didn't go out and pick it from a tree. It's not a hunter-gatherer thing. It's a network thing. And that network thing depends on all these people working together and excuse me. And they are working together through one medium that unites them all. They are united by money. The money for wages, the money to buy produce, the money to pay for the building, the money that all the people who have cooperated in creating this vending point, this point of sale, POS, as they like to call it in the retail business. All the people coming together to create this POS for you, for that tuna can, are motivated and organized together through money, which mediates between all the parts of the system so that they can work together to create that whole. And that whole brings you the tuna can. So part of the payment that you will make on that tuna can, a few pennies or whatever currency you're using, a few cents of the price of the tuna can will go to pay for the venue, for the point of sale, to go to the company, the tuna company. Sorry, not the tuna company, the supermarket company, the greengrocer, or wherever you bought it, the person who maintains this establishment to bring you various products from other places. Now let's go back. Let's go backwards another rung, or upwards, whatever, until we depends on where you are on the Nile. In the sources of the Nile, looking downwards towards Egypt, or in Egypt, looking up and looking for the original spring from which the Nile originates, where Dr. Livingstone went to presume, was presumed to be. Never mind. Okay, let's not digress. Let's focus on this. So, you go, what's the next step? Back, the persons who delivered the tuna to your to this vending point. So that's the suppliers of the supermarket. There can be a number of suppliers. There are various brands of tuna. And these suppliers, these intermediaries, also will have a cut from the payment that you make. They will also get a few pennies from that tuna can that you ultimately bought as a consumer. They bring their produce. These intermediaries, the suppliers, can either be importers of tuna directly, and then they get it from overseas, and they have perhaps a warehouse of storage. They paid for the warehouse. They paid maybe for the shipment that brought the tuna here. So there's a shipping company involved, and everything involved in the shipping company. Take into account that there's a lot of people building the ships, running the ships, the people operating them, and so on and so on and so forth, until that tuna, if it was imported, was brought to the warehouse where the supplier took it and brought it to the vending point. So you have these intermediaries, and they also get a few pennies of your tuna price. Okay, it does not stop here. It goes back, because we haven't even got to the manufacture of the tuna yet. So tunas are sometimes prepackaged overseas and imported into countries, or they are brought frozen in bulk and then processed in local factories. So perhaps it is a local factory who processed the tuna. So maybe they got the tuna, imported it frozen, and now they're cooking it, arranging it, putting it into cans. So you have all the people working in the factory, you have the company operating the factory, the tuna canning factory, and you have all these people, all these employees, they have to be paid. And then you have, of course, all the people involved in production, the graphic artists who created the packaging, created the lovely logo of the company or whatever, the writing on the tuna can, the exact colors. Maybe there are a few brands. Maybe we have like in water, in brine, in olive oil, in canna oil, whatever. There's so many brands now. And each one has to be processed and packaged differently, and there's a different package for it. There's a graphic artist has to produce it, the different packaging, and then there's of course the producer of the tins, the cans themselves. Where did the tin come from? From a mine in Africa or a mine, I don't know, in China? And so that also has to be processed. Is it processed locally? Are the cans imported? There's all kinds of various machines that create the cans, that take the tuna and put it in slices in the cans. And there's also, is it chunky tuna? Is it the leftovers that are like in small, you get all these like tuna really ground, and it's a cheaper product, probably the leftovers from the chunky tuna. All this has to be processed. There's people working there. There's machines involved. They also had to be purchased. There's great enterprises creating the machines. Maybe they were imported from Germany or from South Africa or whatever, where the manufacture of machines for the canning tuna industry are made. All these people come together. What unites them? They are all using money is the bloodline of this corporation. This intersubjective world of others, in which people work, in which people create, the point at which the TISWOORIOM comes into the real is the point where money is employed within the system, and this money, shared by so many people, is capable of organizing, or actually self-organizing, because a lot of this is like independent initiatives. Who set up the tuna company? Who set up the company that makes the machines to can tunas? What about the graphic artist who makes the logos for the tuna cans? Did he or she study in some designer school and then set up shop and then advertise and reach this position where they could design the tuna cans? All these are based on the system of money, this enveloping system of trust that allows people to find their place within the real, within the world of others, through this exchange. So we have not yet reached the tuna. The tuna is still swimming in the sea. We have not even reached the fishermen yet. And yet, already there are thousands of people involved, many institutions, many layers of involvement. And all of them, again, and this goes back to what we started our talk with Marx's lament, all of them are anonymous. It really doesn't matter because some of them may be of very different origins. Some of them may be embedded in very different cultures and civilizations. And we really do not know. Maybe the fisherman, when we get to him, will be a Japanese fisherman fishing in the Sea of Japan. Maybe that fisherman will be actually a Norwegian in the North Sea. I don't know where there are the tunas in the North Sea. No, I think it's more in the Pacific Ocean and in the Indian Ocean. Anyway, so these tuna fishermen, they may be maybe they're Hindi, maybe they are Shinto in their religion, maybe they are very parochial, maybe they don't like strangers, maybe they are like Japan in the Tokugawa or pre-Tokugawa. I don't remember which period it was that Japan was shut off from the world, or China was shut off from the world, and Chinese, many of them are, they don't like strangers, or they have a sort of noblesse oblige, relationship to them. Anyway, they could be Muslim or Jew or Christian or Hindu or Buddhist or whatever. It really doesn't matter. It could be men or women. It can be nationalists or pan-cosmopolitan people. Whatever, they are part of this system, and the money enables them to work together with others without reference to their allegiance, to their race, their creed, their color, their gender, their whatever. Money cuts through all that, and all they share is their productivity, is their involvement in this huge market that will ultimately end in you buying that tuna can. But let's complete the journey of the tuna can. We got to the point that we were packaging it. But what came before that? It had to be caught, right? Let's go right to the start, to the fishing boats, the trawlers, or the sometimes huge floating factories that capture that tuna. And the tuna is a huge fish. It's really a big fish, a few meters long. So it's cut up into many pieces. It takes a lot of technology, a lot of manpower to catch it. And then it has to be preserved, it has to be frozen. There's a lot of technology involving getting it to shore as quickly as possible, conserving it. As I said, there's a lot of floating factories that freeze it as it comes out of the sea in order to bring it fresh to market. So there's a lot of technology of refrigeration. There are investments involved. There are a lot of money involved in getting the infrastructure. So even that fisherman or a group of fishermen who take the tuna out from the sea, even though they may be paid just a few pennies, they also rely on a lot of layers of technology to prepare the way for them being able to take that tuna out of the sea and bring it to shore and bring it to storage. And then you have the intermediaries that bring it to market. What kind of market? Is it going to be marketed, as we said, frozen and then packaged in another country? Or perhaps it will be processed locally and all the factories are local. And then it's just sent out already in cans. So again, we have more and more layers of people involved. So going from the fisherman, who could be one of a group of fishermen, taking it out from the sea, who will get just a minuscule amount of money for taking out that tuna. Perhaps out of this huge fish, you will be paid by quantity to what will be in your can, and the portion that he will get from your can, I've never seen it calculated because all these levels are anonymous. And one of my future projects is to de-anonymize, to try to de-anonymize an entire chain. Find all the people involved in one tuna can. But that could be, it's like thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people. And it could be actually, perhaps the network itself is infinite, because whoever is involved in that network also relies on networks. For a single factory to produce a tuna can, there's so many people involved in the infrastructure and so on, and all those people involved that we saw in that single tuna can they be really dissociated from other networks? It's doubtful. But in any case, that can that you paid for, that money will percolate throughout the system. Ultimately, that fisherman will receive a payment, and part of that payment will be what you paid for that tuna can, which has percolated through the fact that many people buy tuna cans in many POS, many points of sale. It will ultimately percolate to that original fisherman. Now, you don't know him, and he doesn't know you. And ultimately, there may be no connection between you. Maybe if you meet face to face, you will not be able to converse because you speak different languages, or perhaps your religions prohibit contact with each other. One doesn't know. One doesn't know where it came from, but money made it possible. And that money connects you, because your payment and that fisherman's livelihood and all the livelihood of all the thousands of people in that chain of one pack of tuna are interconnected. So we are all part of one world in which that trust embodied in money enables us to cooperate with each other and actually support each other. Because I, for example, earn my money as a translator. Here and there I sell a book as well, which is great. But mostly I do it by translating lots of texts. And my money as a translator, when I buy a can of tuna, I become a participant and I share in the livelihood of all those people. I, as a consumer, am not only a consumer, I am also a provider. And that is, I think, the main thing that Marx missed, that money goes two ways. There's not just people making the product and not being paid for them. There are people paying for the product and enabling the livelihood of other people. And we will get into this issue of egalitarianism and the way that money is distributed and the unfairness of it and cheating and all kinds of stuff and money scams and Ponzi scams and the great crash of 2008, the Great Recession, all really interesting things to see how the ebb and flow of trust, of this embodied trust occurs. But the basic thing is that it unites us all in a single network, in a single fabric of trust that allows wherever you are, anyone, whoever he is, to participate in the livelihood of others, to share with others this creation of our world. So to wrap up Weatherford's contribution to our discussion here, I'm giving you another quotation from him on page 8. Money has created a unified world economy that includes the price of milk and eggs in the market at Bandiagara, as well as the price of stock in Sara Lee Foods or PepsiCo on the New York Stock Exchange. Although fluctuations in politics, religion, technology, and even the weather can play a role in any of these endeavors, money constitutes the basis of the entire system and forms the crucial link in establishing value, facilitating exchange, and creating commerce. Money unites them all together into a single global system. It is the tie that binds us all. So in addition to being what allows us to combine our efforts in mega enterprises, it also permeates everything and underlies everything that is going on in our world today. And our last quotation from Weatherford, in the same direction: a language all nations understand. Afra Ben, 17th century dramatist who grew up in Suriname, wrote in her play The Rover in 1677, "Money speaks sense in a language all nations understand. Money not only speaks sense, it also imposes that sense on whatever society it conquers, and it does so in a way that subjugates all other institutions and systems. From virtually the moment of its invention, money became ever more important in Western society and eventually overwhelmed the feudal system and the aristocratic hierarchies of earlier civilizations. As money swept through history and across societies, its impact seems surprisingly similar from ancient Greece and Rome to modern Japan and Germany. And as we have seen, it is undermining all traditional systems. So, in fact, money is the very essence of the way in which we function in our TISWOORIOM. It is the embodied trust between all of us as human beings, and it's all conceived of in the mind. And in order to understand how it is conceived of in the mind, let us think in brief about the history of money, which we will go into greater depth in future talks. But at the moment, let's just sum up this place of money as an embodiment of mind, as an embodiment of trust between human beings. So the beginnings of money are always in some kind of material artifact that becomes an intermediate barter commodity. So instead of switching milk for bananas or goats for sheep, one switches to the intermediate commodity, let's say seashells or gold, and then that commodity can be replaced for others. So this central commodity already is a point in which all minds focus and agree on a certain value. Certain quantities of gold or whatever other commodity is used as the intermediate commodity are used as substitute for value for other things. Now, throughout the history of money, there grew the slow realization, actually not realization, this happened as a kind of evolution. When we look in retrospect, we see this is what happened. That in fact, this commodity was only like a point to latch on. Because in truth, what makes gold more valuable than other metals? What makes it more desirable? It's just another metal. Today, of course, it is traded like any other commodity. It has no unique role in the world of money as it had before. But it seems that human beings need something to latch onto. For example, the modern cryptocurrencies, as I will talk about later on, are like a tendency to revert to a kind of gold standard, something to latch onto, to say this is of value, this can be counted and counted on to retain its value. While in fact, it is all trust, it is all agreement that this thing has value. Then when we get to paper money, this becomes much more obvious. The original paper money were like bonds stating, please pay to the bearer such and such an amount of gold. So it like became detached from the gold and was an intermediary for an intermediary. But ultimately, these paper money became detached from gold, and they themselves assumed this mantle of trust, became embodied trust, so that all the people trusting in a certain currency would share the value of that currency and accord it the same respect and use it as the embodied trust that enables them to exchange services and products. But it quickly became evident that this paper money is only as good as its backing. We saw this in many wars where paper money of certain states that were losing the war, the country on the losing side also lost the value of its money, so that people would not accept it anymore as a mode of exchange. So only the backing, only so long as it is trusted that there is a backing to that gold, this money still functions. But this is elusive and illusory, because it's still only trust. What if there was no backing and you still trusted that money? Fine. The money still functions. It's only when distrust occurs, when you begin distrusting the money and distrusting the value of the money, that money loses its value. But it never had any value beyond trust. And this is something that is very hard to perceive. And when you read, and we will read a few economic treatises, they still, even though they realize that this money is all in the mind, they still treat it as something that has to be collected, amassed. Now, in the present crisis, the Great Recession in 2008, everybody talk about liquidity. What is liquidity? It's the flow of money. But what is that flow of money? It's the flow of trust that there will be money, that everything is backed by money. But this backing is illusory because it's really not there. And this became, and it is there. It works if you work it. It works if you trust. When you distrust, everything collapses. And the collapse of markets, and we will go into this in greater depth, the collapse of markets are all about the losing of trust, are all about disbelief, are all about distrust. But money itself is not a material thing. Despite all preachers that rage against materiality and materialism, and notwithstanding Marx and all his anti-bourgeoisie position, money is not tangible. It never was. And this was proven when all the nations, following Nixon's lead, when in 1967 he needed money to finance Vietnam and he had no tangible gold, so he said, okay, let's print. And he printed, and it worked well. It was fantastic. Nobody cared. It paid for the weapons, it paid for the people, it paid for tuna cans even. It paid for everything. It was great. It was perfect money. It was the same dollar. Even though it was no longer backed by anything, it was just printed out by the US Treasury. So that, again, this is the great transformation of money in our age, the fiat, the money by fiat. It was always there. It was always inherent, because gold has no real value beyond what humans decide that this is valuable. But it was not tangible, because there was always the way to tie it to some kind of commodity, the way to tie it to some kind of surplus. And we will discuss surplus in a future talk, how the surplus of money gave rise to civilization. And indeed, it is at the core of everything we do and the core of all inequalities, the surpluses. But at the root of all is this belief, this trust that money represents value. And it became evident that it is the value itself that is the value. It is the embodied trust that is the mediator between all people, who mediate their very lives, their very livelihoods, their products, and their actions, what they do with their lives through the medium of money. And once governments began to print money, it became evident that this is the true bedrock of money, the trust that one places in the government to back up the promises of money. But all you need is that promise, trust in me, for it to function. Because if we were to now flood the market, say with counterfeit bills, and probably there are such bills which are not distinguishable from the bills printed by the Treasury. And there's this this joke about the German counterfeiter who would make perfect counterfeits of 5 mark bills in the days of the mark, and each bill costs 4 marks, 0.95 pfennig to make. And for that 5 pfennig, he set up his whole enterprise. Anyway, if all the money were counterfeit and you didn't know it was counterfeit, if it was indistinguishable from the money printed by the treasury, then it would pass as a tradable currency among all peoples. There would be no problem. Only when we become aware that something is counterfeit, only when we begin to distrust, then money loses its value. And we saw this, and we will look at it in greater depth, that all the great commercial collapses have to do with the sudden distrust of assets, of the value of things. So long as value is trusted, so long as all humans agree about the value, no problem, it functions. The whole world operates. But should distrust creep in, everything may collapse. The Great Recession was the great threat, and we're not out of the woods yet, because now the whole world is wavering, not really understanding the depth of how money functions. And we will see this when we investigate the Great Recession, because trust is of essence here. Money is nothing more than embedded trust, and it is behind a screen. It's as if people don't realize this. They give credence to the actual artifact, whether gold or banknotes, or now you have the plastic credit card and the numbers that you have in the bank. And the actual thing is, and it becomes more and more transparent that this is what's going on. It's all embodied trust, and everything is based on that. There is no inherent value in money. Everything in money is within the TISWOORIOM, the inter-subjective world of others represented in our minds. We all agree that it is worth something, worth a lot, and people can starve if they don't have it. It's so strong, this trust. And because of that, money becomes the basis of our world, the basis of the real. And this is increasingly so as we become more and more modern, to the point that today money is almost completely detached from any material things. And as I said, there's a lot of this cryptocurrency. They're trying to bring money back, something to hold on to desperately, instead of realizing the ephemerality, the trust. In God we trust. It's not by chance that this is on every dollar. This is also a modern phenomenon. I think it's in like 1955 or something. After the war, the Americans printed this on their dollar. So it's actually in money we trust, and money is embedded human trust. And if we go back to our theoretical underpinnings, then this embedded human trust is in fact a manifestation of the progression of the divine, as we see that the rise of the human world as a world of mind, a TISWOORIOM in which everything that occurred in evolution up to this point is accelerated through the human mind, and money is one of the points of a kind of scotoma. It's a kind of a point of blindness in our civilization that people attempt to attach materiality to it, and without this attachment of materiality, it would not function as the basis of our trust. But it is completely, utterly by fiat, by dictation from humans to humans, that this is of value. And by trust, we accept it on trust, we accept its authority on trust. So this is the basis of, this talk was the basis of what we are going to discuss about money in the general picture of believing the real. Money becomes our real, the foundation of our world in a great many senses, and is the fecund ground in which humans have spread out their enterprises and mapped out new worlds to conquer, created them through their interactions mediated by the embodied trust that is money. Just as an example of this, for example, we touched this on the tuna can industry, and of course, this industry did not exist 100 years ago. People thought it up. People initiated it. There were entrepreneurs involved throughout the way. And all this entrepreneuring needed money to support it, to foster it, to seed it, and so on. And money constantly expands to fit human creativity. Where does money come from? The government prints it. How does it come into circulation? Through state employees, through public servants. They get their salaries directly from the government, and the government puts the money, the extra money that it wants to put into circulation, into their salaries. So how does it work? It works according to the expansion of creativity in the markets. When markets expand, when people are having more initiatives, creating more enterprises, then the government increases the pool of money. And when people go into recession and they don't create so much, then it prints less money, and it takes money into the system and takes it out of circulation. The whole struggle of the treasury is to keep the amount of money balanced with the amount of productivity in the market. But these are all human endeavors, and it's all in the mind. It's like money is the pool in which human creativity grows. And when there are periods of flourishing, of growth, and that is what all governments aim for, what the whole money economy aims for, then people have great new ideas, and the money helps support these ideas and bring them to fruition. And of course, there are many obstacles, many thresholds, and we'll go specifically into that future talks. But the main thing is that money is what makes the world go round, and not in the materialist, capitalist sense of something egotistic and materialistic and that goes against the grain of goodness as something bad, but rather to the contrary. Money has been much maligned, but it is in truth the way in which we grow, we expand our world, we support our creativity, we support our expansions, and it is a terrible occurrence when we lose trust in money and recession settles in and everything collapses because nobody can be creative, because people in a recession are not going to pay for creativity. They'll stick to the basics, and everything crashes down to commodity level. The whole superstructure of human trust that money enables crashes down when distrust settles in. And this is the reason that we had the great bailout, all the great banks in the world. This is truly an amazing cooperation between banks, offered absolute liquidity, infinite liquidity following the Great Recession in order to stop the entire world from crashing. People would have gone hungry by the millions had this been allowed to develop at this distrust that began, and we will look in depth to see how it began, had it spread. But once it is blocked, then people can continue to create, to live within a world in which every person's talent finds its expression in a market that allows us to, in fact, live in a network with all other people on this planet. And this is all supported by trust, and the great danger is distrust. This has not been tackled yet fully. We will see the measures taken by for example, by the US government following the Great Recession. We'll see that they're still focused on an old vision of money, and they try to provide liquidity in a way that undermines the creativity of money. They are afraid of the cutting edge that allows money to spread very thinly to support enterprises that are not that do not have sufficient collateral, as it were, and this has caused the economy to sort of not really collapse, but more or less stagnate on a certain level. It hasn't continued to expand as it can, and I hope it will be able once it is realized, the true nature of money is realized, and on that level we can work out new ways of handling money, or in truth handling distrust, handling corrosive distrust that may destroy the fabric of our money world, which is so supportive of our creativity. Okay, so this was in fact the introductory talk into this idea of how money, in fact, is an embodiment of trust in our intersubjective world of others represented in our minds. It is a value that we together hold as a group, as a humanity, as entire humanity holds as not sacred but real. We believe money to be real, and we trust in it. And this trust, this belief in the belief in the reality of money, is what makes it real. Paradoxical? Wonderful.